It is such a shame that some awesome new models for the Genestealer Cult are all tied to Necromunda and won't have rules as far as we know in mainstream Warhammer 40,000. This model won't be out for a while, but it will come out, and it will be expensive. But it is a pretty thing to look at. Just stare at the screen and feel better. It is also a shame that this is another member of the Adeptus mechanicus that the 40k AdMech players don't get. Look at all the cool stuff they get in 30k, like zombies with laser guns. And in 40k, there's Stiltman from a medieval fair and a lingering feeling that the codex was not worth purchasing. So we have an Adeptus mechanicus tech priest style model with the usual amount of tech priest arms, the extra mechadendrites, the things that stick out. There's a gun on a big tentacle. That's a bit different. But you've got clamps, you've got some human arms, and you've got some mechanical arms. Oh, hello! Who's this little cutie pie? Don't take that out of context. But it's nice to see another Genestealer Cult familiar. And it's always nice to see more Genestealer Cult character models. We haven't got enough of them. So who is this dude? Because he's a named dude rather than like a character with a rank. This is Tech Priest Biologis Hermiatus. He was someone who wanted to experiment and look into the Genestealer Cult and see if there's anything more they can do. Something that has never gone wrong before, as any information and discussion of Cryptman will show. He lost control of his experiments, and Hive Secundus on Necromunda suddenly got a whole Genestealer Cult. Hermiatus was captured, tortured, forced to confess, and then executed by the Inquisition, who also removed any suggestion that they had been funding any part of his experiments. And Hive Secundus was nuked to try and get rid of any strain of the Genestealer Cult. Unfortunately, the malstrains survived, which is a mutant-y, not quite gone right version of the Genestealer cults. It turns out that much radiation can mess with even the pure part of the pure strains. So although Hermiatus was killed, he has been reborn through a similar mechanism to how the Tyranids work. When the Tyranids absorb the biomatter of a planet, they also reabsorb all of the Tyranid organisms. This is their memories, their combat experience, so that those particular organisms can be regrown once again within the Tyranid hive fleets. It's how the Swarm Lord, despite being killed several times over, keeps coming back because there is a copy that still exists in the memory banks of the hive fleet, and the hive fleet can recreate a new Swarm Lord. If you think that activating this so that it comes back in the Genestealer Cult is totally new and totally different, it's similar to how the genetics work before a child is born in the Genestealer Cult, so that particular strands of the pure strain DNA within them is activated, and that child could become a Magos in the 4th generation, or a Primus in the 2nd generation. So Hermiatus has been reborn to continue tinkering with the Genestealer Cult DNA, but this time more to try and fix a lot of what has happened to the Genestealers on Necromunda, or make it even more powerful. And he works a lot like a Genestealer Cult Magos. He is an unsanctioned psyker. So he is the second in command of the cult, in the way that a Magos is in the Genestealer cults. So hypothetically, if he were to go to a different Genestealer cult, and they somehow absorbed his DNA, they could be able to recreate another version of Hermiatus, and then, potentially, the Genestealer cult could have their first epic hero if they gave these characters 40k rules. Even legend rules to be used in fun games, but not in mainstream games. Though, considering how small our roster is, aside from all the characters, that could not be a bad idea. Suddenly we have malstrain Genestealers. And you could explain that as, oh yeah, sometimes Genestealers do go a bit dodgy. We know we have aberrants. Or sometimes forces act upon the Genestealer cult, like dumping toxic waste into their water supply as a way to try and get rid of them, but it just makes them different rather than killing them all off. It would be great to have an epic hero. So as a cool model, how would you use them in 40k? They're great to represent a leader of the Bladed Cog. The Bladed Cog are Genestealer cults that have infiltrated the Adeptus mechanicus. It's not as hard as it may seem, you just need to go for the more fleshy people, especially the Tech Priest Biologis, the ones that are always studying the different parts of human DNA and trying to cure diseases, and also trying to make them weird and grow bigger Scutari that are full of roid rage. So the Bladed Cog characters would be leaders of the Adeptus mechanicus, but turn to the Genestealer cult, and over successive generations they might be shift leaders or have access to important databanks that they could corrupt or use for the cult's benefit, and then on the day of Ascension they can rise up and counter the Adeptus mechanicus because they have access to all the same tech and can counter their countermeasures. As an alternative, because of the backstory which is all about someone taking the Genestealers, deliberately trying to mess with the DNA and grow a Genestealer cult, that works with the Twisted Helix. The Twisted Helix came about when a medical corporation voluntarily took the Genestealer cult strands into human DNA, and through extreme various medical practices, they created horrifying monsters, basically aberrants. So you could use this Magos as a Magus, psychic leader, that works, has a familiar, that also works. Because of their claw and the way that they are a leader of sorts, they could be a Primus for your army. Or because you're thinking, well, they might stay at the back and do all the tech things and the commanding things and figuring stuff out, so the Nexus is an option. If you want to go more the Twisted Helix backstory style, a Biophagus. There's your tech priest Biologis, who has their own Twisted Science, the special rule of the Biophagus. They also have a familiar, but the base size is maybe a bit big for a Biophagus because they normally use a 25mm base, and this looks to be on a 32mm base. Alternatively, forget Genestealer Cult entirely, and go for an Ordo Xenos Radical. If there are Deathwatch veterans with definitely not Necron Hyperphase swords, have an Agents of the Imperium character of your choice. Just use the Inquisitor's rules, and that character model. It's nice to be able to put a relatively human face to the Genestealer Cult army, or you could forget that and just go full body horror. My darlings and viewers, have a great day of 40k.